"That's enough," Naomi said, her voice calm but firm as she stepped between Vanessa and the trembling boy. Her hand rested on Noah's shoulder, steadying him as his small body shook. The room went silent. The broken glass glistened under the chandelier, red juice spreading slowly across the white marble floor. Vanessa's hand hung mid-air, her face twisted with anger she tried to hide. The air felt thick, too heavy to breathe. Before she could speak again, the sound of the front door opening echoed through the mansion. It was slow, quiet, but carried a weight that made both women turn. Ethan Reed stood in the doorway, suitcase still in his hand. He was not supposed to be home until the weekend. He had come 3 days earlier than usual, hoping for silence, for peace, after endless meetings. But what he saw from the doorway made his heart stop. His little boy, Noah, stood trembling beside the maid, his small fingers clutching the fabric of her dress. The broken glass, the faint bruise forming on the boy's arm, and the look of fear in his eyes told Ethan everything before anyone spoke. For a moment, he could not breathe. "What happened here?" he asked quietly. His voice carried no shout, no warning, but it was colder than anger. Vanessa stepped back, trying to gather herself. "Ethan, it was an accident," she said quickly, her voice smooth but shaking underneath. "He broke the glass, and I was only—" "Only what?" Ethan interrupted. His gaze moved from the floor to her face. She froze, her words stuck in her throat. He didn't raise his voice, yet every syllable felt like judgment. Naomi held Noah closer. "It was just an accident," she said softly, but he got scared when she shouted. Vanessa's eyes flared. "You stay out of this," she snapped. "You're here to clean, not to tell stories." Noah flinched at her tone, pressing his face against Naomi's side. Ethan noticed that small movement, and something inside him hardened. He walked forward, slow, his shoes echoing against the marble. When he reached them, he bent down to his son's level. "Noah," he said quietly, "did she hurt you?" The boy didn't answer at first. His lips trembled. He looked up at his father, then at Vanessa, then back at Naomi. Finally he nodded, just once, and whispered, "She squeezed my arm." Ethan's hand froze on the suitcase handle. The house was silent again, except for the soft ticking of the clock. He stood up straight, looking at Vanessa, his expression unreadable. "You put your hands on my child," he said slowly. Each word came like the closing of a door. Vanessa's face turned pale. "Ethan, you can't be serious," she stammered. "You're taking her side? A maid's word over mine?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved to Naomi, still holding his son protectively. The calm strength in her face struck him. She wasn't trying to defend herself. She was only focused on Noah. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was steady. "Her name is Naomi," he said quietly. "And yes, I believe her." Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came. The shock on her face turned into anger. She looked at Naomi with pure contempt. "You'll regret this," she muttered, her heels clicking sharply as she turned and stormed out of the room. The front door slammed behind her, leaving the mansion quiet again. For a long time, no one moved. Ethan stood by the table, his mind full but his face calm. Naomi still knelt beside Noah, her hand rubbing his back slowly. The boy was trying not to cry, but the tears slipped out anyway. "It's all right," Naomi whispered. "You're safe now." Her voice carried warmth that seemed to soften the air. Ethan watched them, something shifting inside him that he could not name. He had built his life on order, on control, but the sight of this simple comfort broke through that armor. After a few moments, he knelt beside his son and gently touched the bruise on his arm. "Does it hurt?" he asked. Noah shook his head. "Not much," he whispered. Ethan looked at Naomi. "Thank you," he said quietly. She shook her head. "You don't need to thank me, sir. I only did what anyone should do." "Not everyone would," Ethan replied. Their eyes met for a brief second, a look filled with unspoken things. She quickly looked away, focusing on Noah. Ethan stood, running a tired hand through his hair. "Take him to his room," he said softly. "I'll handle everything else." Naomi nodded, taking Noah's hand. As they walked upstairs, Ethan stayed still, listening to their footsteps fade. The house felt strangely different now, quieter but fuller somehow. He turned toward the window, looking at the city lights beyond the glass. His thoughts ran deep. He had built everything he had through numbers, plans, and precision. Yet here, in the middle of his own home, control had failed him. When Naomi came back downstairs, she found him standing in the same place. "He's asleep," she said softly. Ethan nodded without looking away from the window. "You've been working here for how long?" "Almost 6 months," she replied. He turned to face her. "In 6 months, you did what no one else could. My son has been afraid of everyone, even me, but he trusts you." Naomi hesitated. "Children know when someone truly cares, sir. That's all it takes." Her words lingered in the air. Ethan wanted to respond, but he couldn't find the right words. He only nodded slowly. As Naomi started to leave, he said quietly, "Naomi." She turned. "Stay close to him tomorrow. I don't want him left alone for a while." "I understand," she replied. When she was gone, Ethan sat down at the table. The broken glass was still scattered across the floor. He picked up one of the pieces carefully, watching how it caught the light. It was strange, he thought, how one small moment could shatter everything and reveal what truly mattered. Outside, the city hummed in the distance. Inside, the mansion finally felt human again. That night, as he walked past his son's room, Ethan stopped at the doorway. Noah was asleep, his small hand clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Beside the bed, Naomi had placed a small lamp that glowed softly. She had left it on, just in case he woke up afraid. Ethan stood there for a long time, watching his son sleep, the sound of quiet breathing filling the room. He whispered to himself, "He's safe now," though he wasn't sure if he was saying it to his son or to his own heart. Morning came slowly to the Reed mansion. Sunlight crept through the tall glass windows, falling across the spotless floor. Naomi was already awake, standing by the stove in the main house kitchen. The smell of pancakes filled the air, warm and sweet. She moved quietly, careful not to wake Noah too early. Her hands worked with gentle rhythm, but her thoughts were restless. She kept replaying last night in her mind, the sound of the glass breaking, the fear in Noah's eyes, the moment Ethan walked in. Everything had changed in seconds. She had seen anger before, but the silence in his voice had felt colder than any shout. A soft voice broke through her thoughts. "Good morning." Naomi turned. Ethan stood by the doorway, wearing a plain shirt, no suit, no tie. He looked different from the man she usually saw, rushing out early every morning. He looked human, even tired. "Good morning, sir," Naomi replied politely. "I made breakfast." He nodded once, his eyes resting on the pan for a moment before he spoke again. "How's Noah?" "He's better," she said. "He slept peacefully all night. I checked on him around 3. He didn't wake up." Ethan looked down, his voice quieter. "He never sleeps through the night, until now." Naomi smiled faintly. "Sometimes children just need to feel safe, sir." Her words settled softly in the room. Ethan didn't reply, but he looked at her for a long moment. She noticed something in his eyes, something heavy but kind. When Noah finally came down, his little feet pattering against the stairs, he ran straight to Naomi, not to his father. She bent down, wiping a bit of sleep from his cheek. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said warmly. "Good morning, Miss Naomi," he said shyly, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Ethan watched the moment quietly. It made him realize how much his son trusted this woman. He had hired many caregivers, but none of them could reach Noah. Yet somehow, Naomi had done it without even trying. "Sit down," Naomi said to Noah. "Breakfast is ready." They all sat at the long dining table. The pancakes were warm, syrup dripping from the sides. Noah giggled as he tried to cut his portion, getting syrup all over his fingers. Naomi laughed softly, handing him a napkin. "You're a little mess," she said. Ethan found himself smiling for the first time in a long while. The sound of their laughter filled the house, chasing away the stiffness that had always hung in the air. When breakfast was done, Naomi stood to clean the table, but Ethan spoke before she could move. "Leave it for now. Sit down." She hesitated, unsure if he was serious. "Sir?" "I said sit," he repeated, but his tone wasn't harsh. It sounded almost gentle. Naomi sat slowly. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have had to go through that last night. You protected my son when I wasn't here." "You don't have to apologize," she said softly. "Any mother, or even any person with a heart, would have done the same." Ethan's gaze lifted. "You're not his mother," he said, then paused, realizing how it sounded. "I mean, I didn't expect someone who works here to care so much." Naomi looked down at her hands. "When you've lost people, sir, you learn how to protect what's left. I see fear in Noah because I've seen it before." Her voice trembled slightly. Ethan didn't push. He only nodded, letting her words sink in. A few moments passed before Noah spoke again. "Daddy, are you going back to your trip?" Ethan's chest tightened. "No, buddy, not for now." Naomi smiled faintly. "He'll like that," she said. "I think I will too," Ethan replied quietly. The rest of the morning went calmly. Naomi cleaned. Noah played with his toy cars, and Ethan sat by the window, pretending to read while his eyes followed them. He noticed how Naomi always crouched to Noah's level when she spoke to him, how she listened carefully when he said even the smallest things. Later that afternoon, Ethan received a call from his assistant. He stepped out to the patio to answer, his voice calm but firm as he gave instructions. When he came back, he found Naomi outside in the courtyard. Noah was standing by the puddle again, this time trying to balance a small stick in the water. "Careful, baby," she said gently. "One step at a time." Ethan stopped at the doorway, watching. Noah lifted his foot, shaky but determined, and took 2 small steps. He stumbled, but Naomi caught him quickly, holding him until he was steady again. "Good job," she whispered, smiling wide. Ethan's throat tightened. The doctors had said it would take months before Noah could walk without fear, but here he was, trying, trusting, and smiling. Naomi looked up suddenly and saw Ethan watching. Their eyes met. She stood quickly, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean—" "Don't," he interrupted softly. "Don't apologize. He needs this." Naomi relaxed a little. "He's getting stronger," she said. "You should be proud." Ethan nodded, though the words caught in his throat. "I am," he said finally, "but I think it's because of you." Her cheeks warmed slightly. "No, sir. He just needed someone to believe he could do it." Ethan didn't answer, but inside, he knew she was right. For the first time in years, he felt something that money had never given him: peace. As evening approached, the house grew quiet again. Naomi helped Noah with his bath, then tucked him into bed with his favorite toy. She hummed softly, a tune so low it barely reached the hallway. Ethan stood by the door, listening without interrupting. When she stepped out, he spoke quietly. "You sing to him every night?" She nodded. "It helps him sleep. He used to wake up crying a lot. Music makes him feel safe." Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "You've done more for him in a few months than I have in years." Naomi shook her head. "You're his father. All he ever needed was to know you were near." Her words struck him deep. "Near," he repeated, almost to himself. "I've been in this house every day, but I don't think I've ever really been here." Naomi didn't reply. She only gave a small nod, then walked down the hallway quietly. Ethan stayed there for a while, his thoughts heavy. Through the open door, he could hear Noah's soft breathing and the faint tune Naomi had been humming. The mansion, once filled with silence and pride, now carried something else: warmth. When Ethan finally went to bed, he looked out through his window at the city lights of Chicago. For years, those lights had meant success. Now they only reminded him of how far he had drifted from what truly mattered. Downstairs, Naomi sat by the kitchen table, writing in a small notebook she kept hidden in her apron. She wrote lists, reminders, and short notes of hope she never spoke out loud. At the top of the page, she wrote one simple line: "Sometimes love begins with courage." She closed the notebook slowly, unaware that the man upstairs had begun to understand that same truth. The next morning began with quiet light falling over the Reed estate. The air felt different, softer, as if the house itself had exhaled after years of holding its breath. Naomi moved quietly through the main house kitchen, folding clean towels and setting out breakfast. The smell of coffee mixed with the gentle sound of birds outside. Ethan hadn't come down yet, but she could tell he hadn't slept much. She had seen his light on late into the night when she checked the hallway. She understood that kind of restlessness, the one that comes when a person starts thinking about what truly matters. As she poured orange juice into a glass, Noah came running into the kitchen with his small dinosaur toy in his hand. "Miss Naomi," he said, smiling. "Look, I walked all the way from my room by myself." Naomi's heart lifted. She knelt and hugged him gently. "You did. That's wonderful, Noah. I'm proud of you." Ethan's voice came from the doorway, calm but proud. "I'm proud too." Noah turned and ran to his father's legs. Ethan bent down, picking him up easily. "You walked like a champion," he said with a smile. Noah giggled and wrapped his small arms around his father's neck. Naomi watched quietly, warmth filling her chest. She had seen them distant for so long, but now there was something new between them: connection. They ate breakfast together. The three of them. For once, there were no phones, no tension, just quiet conversation. Ethan asked about Noah's favorite cartoons, and Noah talked endlessly about dinosaurs. Naomi laughed softly when syrup ended up on Ethan's sleeve. He didn't even care. But peace never lasts long when the world is watching. By noon, Ethan's phone buzzed several times. He ignored it at first, then finally picked it up. His expression changed the moment he looked at the screen. Naomi noticed his jaw tighten. "Sir?" she asked gently. He sighed. "It's nothing," he said, though his voice betrayed him. She waited, not pressing. Ethan placed the phone face down on the table, rubbing his temple. After a moment, he spoke quietly. "It's Vanessa. She's talking to the media." Naomi froze. "About what happened?" He nodded slowly. "About you, about me, about this house. She's saying things that aren't true." Noah looked up from his pancakes. "Is she coming back, Daddy?" Ethan's face softened. "No, buddy, she's not coming back." The little boy nodded, content with that answer, but Naomi could see the storm building behind Ethan's calm. He excused himself and stepped outside to take another call. Through the window, Naomi saw him pacing near the garden, his shoulders tense, his hand gripping his phone tightly. Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Is Daddy angry?" She knelt beside him. "He's just worried, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to fix things." "Can I help?" Noah asked innocently. Naomi smiled sadly. "You already do. You help by being you." When Ethan came back in, his face looked tired. He sat at the edge of the table, silent. Naomi could feel the weight on him. She knew this wasn't about business, it was personal. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. Ethan hesitated. "I don't want you to worry, Naomi. But I think Vanessa is trying to destroy your name. There are articles online already. They're saying you came between us." Naomi looked down at her hands. "People believe what they want to believe, sir. I can't fight lies with anger." Ethan's voice sharpened slightly. "But I can." She looked up at him calmly. "And what will that teach Noah? That fighting back makes you right? Or that truth can't stand on its own?" Her words stopped him cold. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he leaned back slowly, his anger fading into thought. "You always know what to say," he murmured. "No," she said quietly. "I just know what pain looks like. You can't let it rule you." That afternoon, the house was unusually quiet. Ethan spent hours in his study, reading reports and trying to manage the fallout. Naomi stayed with Noah, helping him color pictures in the living room. Every now and then, she caught herself glancing toward the closed office door. She wanted to help, but she knew he had to fight his own battles too. Later in the evening, Ethan finally came out. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but there was something in his eyes, a decision. "Naomi," he said, "do you trust me?" She blinked, unsure where he was going. "Yes, sir." "Then trust that I'll make this right." She nodded slowly. "Just promise me one thing," she said. "Don't lose yourself trying to fix what people think. Focus on what's real. That's Noah, and peace in this house." Ethan stared at her for a long time, then nodded. "You're right," he said quietly. "You always are." He turned away, walking toward the balcony doors. Naomi followed him with her eyes. The evening sun painted the city gold, and the skyline stretched endlessly across the horizon. Ethan spoke without turning. "You know, I've lived in this house for 10 years, but it's only felt like home since you walked in." Naomi's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. His voice was steady, but there was something fragile underneath it. "Sir," she said softly, "I'm just doing my job." He finally turned to her. "No, Naomi, you're doing much more than that." The air between them grew quiet again. He stepped closer, but not too close, enough for her to see the tired kindness in his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "For him, and for everything you've done." Naomi looked away, her cheeks warm. "You don't have to thank me, sir. I'm just glad he's smiling again." Ethan nodded. "He smiles because you make him feel safe." They stood there for a while, silence wrapping around them like a fragile peace. In the distance, thunder rolled, faint but real. It felt like a warning. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Naomi sat at the kitchen table with her notebook again. She wrote slowly, her handwriting small and neat. She wrote, "Peace is not the absence of storms, it is learning to stand still when they come." She closed the book and looked out the window. Rain had begun to fall lightly against the glass, tapping softly like a whisper. Upstairs, Ethan stood by Noah's bed, watching his sons sleep. His heart felt heavy, yet grateful. He thought about Naomi's words, about the truth that didn't need to fight to exist. He whispered to himself, "She's right," though no one could hear. Outside, the rain grew stronger, washing the city clean. But inside the mansion, both Ethan and Naomi were learning, in silence, that peace sometimes begins with pain. The next day started with rain. The sky over Chicago was heavy and gray, the kind of morning that made the world feel smaller and quieter. Naomi stood by the window of the Reed mansion, watching the water slide down the glass. It felt like the house was holding its breath again. She had that same feeling inside her chest, something she couldn't name. The storm outside wasn't the only one brewing. Inside, the noise of the outside world had reached their doorstep. By mid-morning, Naomi's phone began to buzz with messages from people she barely knew. Some were kind, telling her to stay strong, but others were cruel. They said she was lucky, that she was using her job to trap a rich man. The words made her stomach twist. Ethan came downstairs holding his own phone, his face tight with anger. "It's everywhere," he said quietly. "Every website, every social page, they all have something to say." Naomi turned slowly, her eyes calm but tired. "About me?" "About both of us," Ethan replied. "Vanessa told the press you've been trying to take her place. She's saying you want my money, my home, everything." Naomi didn't look surprised. "That's what people always say when a woman like me stands too close to power." Her voice was soft, but the truth in it made Ethan flinch. He stepped closer, his voice full of regret. "Naomi, I didn't protect you from this. I should have stopped it before it started." "You couldn't have," she said quietly. "People like her know how to twist the story. All I can do is stay quiet." He shook his head. "No, you shouldn't have to hide or stay silent. You did nothing wrong." She looked down at her hands. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than defense." "Sir, people will believe what they want. Let them talk. Let them finish." Ethan wanted to argue, but her calm stopped him. He took a deep breath, his voice softer. "At least let me make a public statement. I can clear your name." Naomi met his eyes. "And then what? They'll call it guilt. They'll say you're defending me because you love me. They'll twist that too." Her words hit him hard. For a long time, he didn't speak. The sound of rain filled the room between them. "You're right," he said finally. "No matter what I say, they'll find something to feed on." Naomi nodded gently. "Let's focus on what matters. Noah doesn't need to hear about this. Let's keep his peace safe." When she mentioned Noah, his anger softened. "You think of him before you think of yourself," he said quietly. "You always do." Naomi smiled faintly. "That's what love looks like, sir. It doesn't talk much. It just protects." Her words stayed with him all day. By afternoon, Ethan's lawyer came by the mansion with folders and letters from sponsors and business partners. Some were questioning his judgment, others threatening to pull away from his projects. Naomi kept her distance, cleaning and staying busy, though she could hear their muffled voices from the office. When the lawyer left, Ethan walked to the kitchen where she was wiping the counter. His expression was tired but resolved. "They want me to let you go," he said quietly. Naomi froze, the rag still in her hand. "I understand," she said after a pause. "It's business." "It's wrong," he said firmly. "They don't get to decide who stays in my home. You work here because I trust you, because Noah trusts you. That's final." Naomi's voice stayed calm. "But you could lose everything, sir." Ethan shook his head. "I'd rather lose everything than lose what's real. I won't let them ruin what we've built here." Her chest tightened at his words, but she said nothing. That evening, the rain stopped, but the quiet in the house was heavier than before. Noah drew pictures in the living room, little stick figures holding hands under a sun. Naomi sat beside him, her heart full yet heavy. "Who's that?" she asked softly, pointing at one of the drawings. "That's you," Noah said with a smile. "And that's me, and that's Daddy." Her throat tightened. "We look happy," she whispered. "We are," Noah said simply. Ethan had been watching from the hallway, unseen. The small drawing hit him deeper than any business threat. That picture was what truly mattered. That was family. Later that night, when Naomi walked past the study, she saw the light still on. Ethan sat at the desk, staring at his laptop. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled up. She knocked gently. "You should rest, sir," she said softly. He looked up. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "I keep thinking about how all this started, about that glass, that moment." Naomi stepped closer. Maybe it was meant to break, so something else could be fixed. Her words made him pause. You think so? Yes, she said, smiling faintly. Sometimes broken things show us what's real. He leaned back in his chair, watching her quietly. You always find peace in everything, don't you? I try to, she replied. Peace is the only thing I can control. For a while, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked softly, and the house seemed to breathe again. When Naomi turned to leave, Ethan called her name. Naomi. She looked back. His voice lowered. You've changed this house. You've changed me. Her eyes softened. No, sir. You just started seeing what was always there. Their gazes held for a moment too long, and then she turned away, disappearing into the hallway. Ethan sat still, his chest heavy with thoughts he didn't understand yet. That night, he couldn't sleep again. Around midnight, he walked quietly to Noah's room. The boy was asleep, clutching his dinosaur toy. Naomi had left the lamp on again, a warm yellow light glowing softly in the corner. Ethan stood there, his heart full of both gratitude and fear. He whispered to himself, I won't let anyone hurt you again, my boy. Not you, not her. Downstairs, Naomi sat by the window, staring at the wet streets. The city lights reflected on the puddles, reminding her of the life she had before she came here. She had once promised herself never to stay too long anywhere, but this house had changed that. She had found something here that felt like home, something she didn't want to lose. As the night stretched on, both of them stayed awake in different rooms, thinking the same thought without knowing it. They were no longer just a boss and an employee. They were two wounded souls trying to protect the same light. And though neither spoke of it, both could feel it. The world outside was about to test everything they had built inside. The morning air carried a strange calm over the Reed estate. The sky was pale blue, but the peace felt thin, like it could break at any second. Naomi stood by the front steps, watching Noah chase butterflies near the garden. His laughter floated in the air, innocent and bright. For a moment, it almost felt like everything was back to normal. But inside the mansion, Ethan's phone kept buzzing. The media storm hadn't slowed. Every channel, every post, carried some rumor about him and Naomi. Some called it scandal. Others called it betrayal. None of them knew the truth. When Naomi came inside, she found Ethan standing in front of the large window in the living room. His phone was in his hand, his expression distant. Sir, she said softly, you should eat something. You've been standing there all morning. He didn't turn around. They're organizing a charity gala tonight, he said quietly. Vanessa will be there. Her people have turned it into a public show. She's using it to tell her side. Naomi's heart sank. And what will you do? Ethan finally turned to face her. I'm going. Naomi looked uncertain. That will only give them more to talk about. I don't care, he said, his voice firm. They've said enough. Tonight, I speak the truth. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If that's what you believe is right, then I'll trust you. Before he left for the gala, Ethan knelt to speak to Noah. Be good for Miss Naomi, all right? I'll be back soon. Noah nodded. Can Miss Naomi come too? Ethan hesitated. Naomi smiled gently and shook her head. Not this time, sweetheart. You and I will wait here. But when evening came, Naomi couldn't sit still. She turned on the television and saw the flashes of cameras, the lights, the crowd. Vanessa Price stood at the center, her white gown gleaming under the lights, smiling sweetly for the reporters. She spoke with practiced sadness, her words polished, her tone full of control. She was twisting the truth again. Naomi turned off the TV. Her heart pounded with quiet fear, not for herself, but for Ethan. She knew the world didn't like men who chose kindness over image. She whispered a short prayer for him under her breath. At the gala, Ethan stood under the bright lights, every camera facing him. He had been called to the stage to speak about his foundation, but all anyone wanted was drama. Vanessa sat near the front, her eyes sharp behind her smile. When Ethan took the microphone, the room fell silent. His voice came steady, heavy with emotion. "I had a speech prepared," he began. "But I've realized that sometimes silence protects the wrong things." A ripple moved through the crowd. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. Ethan continued, his eyes scanning the room. "A lie can live for a while, but it cannot outlive truth. The woman who has been blamed, mocked, and insulted, she did nothing wrong. Her name is Naomi Clark. She is not a thief. She is not a manipulator, and she is not a problem. She protected my son when no one else did." The crowd murmured. Cameras clicked. Vanessa's face hardened. Ethan's voice grew softer, but every word was clear. "I let silence make her a target. I thought staying quiet would protect my family, but it only fed the lies. Tonight, I'm ending that silence." Gasps filled the room as he turned slightly toward Vanessa. "You tried to break someone good, Vanessa, but all you did was show the world who you truly are." The host stood frozen. Reporters whispered. For the first time, Vanessa's confident mask began to crack. She forced a laugh, but no one joined her. Ethan stepped away from the microphone. "If anyone came here tonight thinking Naomi is the problem," he said, "then maybe it's time to ask yourself why goodness threatens you." When he left the stage, the applause began softly, one person, then another, until half the room stood. It wasn't loud or cheerful. It was heavy and honest, a sound of respect, not spectacle. Back at the mansion, Naomi sat by the TV, tears welling in her eyes as she watched the live broadcast. She had never wanted recognition, never wanted a stage, but hearing her name spoken with such truth made her chest ache. Noah, sitting beside her, clapped his hands. "Daddy's so brave," he said. Naomi smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart, he is." A few hours later, Ethan came home. The night air followed him through the door, cool and quiet. He looked tired, but lighter somehow. Naomi stood by the hallway, her hands clasped nervously. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Yes, I did. You deserve to be seen the right way." Naomi looked down, her voice trembling. "The world won't change overnight, sir. They'll still talk." Ethan nodded. "Let them talk. I don't live for their noise anymore." The silence between them deepened, full of things unspoken. Then he said, "You know, all this time I thought I was protecting my company, my name, my future. But the truth is, you were the one protecting what mattered most, my son, and my peace." Naomi's eyes filled with quiet tears. "I just wanted to do what was right." Ethan smiled faintly. "And that's what makes you different." He took a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Naomi hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single silver key. She looked up in surprise. "What's this?" Ethan smiled softly. "A storefront on Maple and Fifth. You once told me about your dream, about opening a small cafe one day. Now you can." Naomi's hand trembled. "Sir, I can't accept this." "You can," he said quietly. "It's not charity, it's trust." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll make it real," Ethan replied. "For you, for Noah, for everyone who needs a place that feels like home." Naomi nodded slowly, her voice breaking. "I will." A few months later, the little cafe opened its doors. The sign above read, "Willow and Stone Cafe." People from the neighborhood came, not because of fame, but because it felt warm, honest, and full of love. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air, and laughter echoed against the walls. Naomi moved gracefully between tables, wearing a simple apron, her face glowing with peace. Ethan often sat in the corner with Noah, watching her work, pride softening his eyes. One evening, As the cafe lights dimmed and Noah slept on a chair nearby, Ethan placed a folder on the counter. Inside were papers with Naomi's name beside his and Noah's guardianship and recognition, proof that she was now part of their family. Naomi looked at the papers, then at him. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "Family isn't always made by blood, Naomi. It's made by people who choose to stay." She signed, tears streaming down her cheeks, and so did he. Outside, the wind blew gently through the streets of Chicago, carrying the scent of rain and new beginnings. Inside, warmth filled the little cafe. For the first time in their lives, Ethan, Naomi, and Noah were not bound by fear or noise. They were bound by something much stronger: love built on truth, and a home built on peace. Is 6/9. 1. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that real family isn't always made by blood, but by the hearts that choose to stay. Naomi didn't fight with power, she fought with love, and that changed everything. Remember, peace is not in money or titles. It's in the people who make you feel safe. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Tell us what you learned from Naomi's courage and Ethan's change.